Living Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and recording this the day before the last day of Black History Month. You know, I want to say a couple things. First of all, Black history is American history. That means that there's no real designated time or place or more or less opportune time to talk about the reality of Black contributions and their impact, not only on this country, but the free world and the future of humanity as we know it. You know, so as I think about just what does it mean to really like celebrate and honor Black history, I really think it's about really cherishing the present and building a strong Black future. And for me, like, as lofty as an ideal as that may sound, for me, that means really living as freely and joyously as possible as I can every single day. That means pouring into my two beautiful daughters, Aman and Emery. That means loving my wife, Candace. It means being the best son I can be to my mother and my father, and being the best brother I can be to my brothers and sisters, both by blood and by marriage. And it means building a legacy by investing and saving my money and thinking about my children and my children's children and so on and so forth. And it means laughing and just having a good time. Really, truly. You know, we say this whole thing where we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and some of that comes off a little pretentious, and because I don't know if our ancestors dreamed that we would be chasing money and working from 9 to 9 every day in the name of some bag or position. I'd like to think that my ancestors, who came from a small plantation in Shuqualak, Mississippi, that they would have fantasized that I was able to rest and just enjoy my days. You know, I'm really excited about the conversation we were able to have with JaNaye Norman. JaNaye is an HR professional and just tons of fun, great personality, great person. We had a really great discussion today about Black folks and human resources, and really what this landscape looks like today, and just navigating it in the world of work. I love it when we have HR professionals on, because thankfully, truly, they rarely have ever pulled any punches. And, you know, I've been conditioned. I was not raised to think this way because I didn't have people really telling me how to navigate corporate America. But I've been conditioned to really not see HR as a friend. And I've been validated in that in several different ways over, you know, the last 10 plus years of my career. However, you know, I will say it's interesting engaging with Black folks who are not putting on whiteness and really looking to make an impact in their work. Now, typically those types of Black folks don't last long in their HR positions, but it's still a blessing to run into them. And so I want to shout out JaNaye. I want to shout out Storyblocks. You know, y'all are a friend of the show. JaNaye, hope you know you come back anytime. And we say that at the end of the conversation. But I'm excited about you checking out this interview with JaNaye Norman. And I will see you on the other side, okay? All right, talk to you in a little bit. Peace. The Antigen podcast returns with a 3-part miniseries spotlighting maternal immunization. When it comes to vaccine development, there's been a shifting paradigm. Help protect pregnant women and their infants through research rather than from research. Join us this season to dive deeper into this topic, the history, challenges, innovations, and exciting developments to come. Subscribe and listen to The Antigen, powered by Pfizer, on your favorite podcast app. JaNaye, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I am doing well. How about you?
You know what? I'm doing well. You know, we were talking offline about I got these kids.
New kid. Like you can't even say like they old enough to just keep driving out.
No, definitely not. Well, my 3-year-old, she's turning 3 next month. She want to be driving. But no, I got this 4-month-old is definitely, she on me. We at the hip on everything. Listen, I'm excited to have you on the show. We were also talking about the fact that, you know, we have been rescheduling for a grip. Look, I want to just start with, you've held a variety of roles, right? Like, and the thing about it is, like, you're a millennial, right? Like, you ain't really been out of college that long. Mm-mm. But like, when I look at your LinkedIn, it says 21 different roles, right? But I'm looking at, like, you're an intern a few different places. Yeah. Then you worked at John Deere for some time. Yeah. Shout out to John Deere. My grandfather, he retired from John Deere after 30 years. You were head of people at Hawk Media. Then you worked at a few other spots. Yat Labs. You were head of people there. You were VP of people at Moto Labs. Like, you've been jumping all around. So I'm gonna just get it out there, right? How much of that is JaNaye doing her thing, just trying to zigzagging upwards, I see a lot of high performing millennials do that. They zigzag up, or at least maybe I'm projecting because that's what I do. I don't know. But how much of it is that versus Black women being overworked, undersponsored, underpaid, and you just having to kind of get in where you fit in?
Oh, you know what? That is a very unique and good question, because I think it's a combination of both. So I think it was definitely in my 20s. Once I get this role, once I get this job title, I'm set. I've made it. This is what it's going to look like for me to feel successful. And then the other half of that is fight or flight. Like, this isn't the right environment for me to grow and thrive in, because I can be a builder anywhere. I can achieve what I want to achieve. But if the culture isn't there to help sponsor me or make sure that they are there to defend me against unconscious biases that exist in the workplace when it comes to, oh, well, she came off aggressive, or she's not as engaged in that meeting as we thought she was. And, well, I just didn't like the tone of how she presented something. Okay, well, I can't really do anything about that. But if there aren't sponsors and allies who are able to support it, I think it just made a difference. And I think a lot of it was me trying to find an industry that sort of catered to my uniqueness of what I brought to the table.
And so when you talk about your uniqueness, what you bring to the table, like, what does that mean? Talk to me.
Definitely I would say my spunkiness and unrelenting optimism. I think it plays a lot into who I am as a person. I'm going to be who I am inside of work as well as outside of work. And I don't want to have to corporate politic or push myself into a box to make others feel comfortable around me. I think women in corporate America have had to do that for too long, and it shouldn't have to continue. I think I'm one of the people who's going to buck the trend of what HR should be and what it could be, and making sure we're pushing the envelope to get to that.
You know, like to that end, right? Like, you kind of alluding to what a lot of people refer to as code switching, right? Like, I got to put on this new or this different identity for the sake of my survival and comfortability of white folks around me. You know, back in like 2016, I stopped all that code switching. Because here's the thing. They gonna know you Black. It don't matter. It don't matter. They know you Black, dog. Yeah. You can sit around here and conjugate every little word you need to, like, bro, like, it's so funny, right? Because, and here's the other thing too. I've realized this now after therapy. Like, the way my mental health is set up, I need to continue to be who I am, so I continue to recognize me. Yep. You know what I'm saying? I don't do well, like, compartmentalizing parts of who I am in different spaces and places. Because then, you know, you quote unquote slip up and you do something in one place that you didn't want to do other. It's like, bro, just be the same. Just be the same. You know what I'm saying? And like, and I'm not shaming anybody who chooses to do that. Like we've had like professors and stuff on talking about like the psychology of code switching. So like, I'm not dismissing it, but just for me, it's like, man, like you're not fooling nobody. And the irony is you're trying to you're trying to adopt white jargon while white and white adjacent people are trying to adopt black jargon. So you trying to move like them and they talking like you. All right, brother, talk to you later. It's like,
yeah, oh my gosh, is that what you guys call a weave or something? You are just so great. And I'm just like, wait a minute, that's not what we were talking about in this conversation. But I'm glad you feel like we are close enough for you to ask me how my hair looks. But thanks. Let's move on to something else about this PowerPoint I gave you 3 weeks ago. And you
3 weeks ago. Right, that you behind on. Okay, so the other thing, and I could be wrong, is, you know, I sense that, you know, you're like a person of the people. Like, you know, like we didn't talk about your background, but you don't give off that you really came from royalty. Like you like how did like working family, lower middle class, like.
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely probably middle class family in terms of my parents having degrees. Education is important. This is what you should do to be successful. My mom having an MBA, telling me like, all right, once you have these sort of things, like make sure you focus on books more than boys. Even though I think it was drilled into my 16-year-old me to be like, oh my God, like I got it. And then getting out there and realizing, oh, wait a minute, I think I needed to make sure I studied for this before I went on this date. But yes, it was truly, you have to, I think it's the thing that most millennials were given and then sort of unlearning from their Gen X or parents was you have to work twice as hard. You have to be twice as good to get half of what they got. And then it was like probably my first corporate job at John Deere. And it was like, now, wait a minute. I've done all those things. I checked all the boxes. I got the degrees. I got the internships. I had the awards, accolades. I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. And then when I was passed over for a promotion or I didn't get to do the opportunity that I thought I deserved just based off nepotism, politics, whatever you want to call it, it was a rude awakening in terms of, okay, well, what happens next or what happens now? And really having to go to therapy and navigate what it truly means to be who I am inside and outside of work.
You know, like, and I asked that, thank you for sharing, right? Because I asked that because I think there are some times when people who are in HR roles, it's like, so everybody tells you, right? Black folks, white folks, whoever, they'll tell you, HR is there to protect the company. And what I've seen is when there are HR people who are, it's not that they're trying to harm the company, but they really are employee centric. Yep. They seem to not last long. And so,
wait a minute, Roland, just go ahead and pull my collar, why don't you?
And so I'm trying to figure out, and I'm not, you know, I'm seeing all these movements, right? I'm trying to figure out what role, like, has that ever played a role? Like you just being like, hey, like this is not right for the employees. Like, have you had those situations before where you've had to advocate for the people?
Oh, I think every major leadership role that I've had, either after I come into any company that I do, I'll do an audit. I will talk to employees. The first thing I will say, because I think it's important to know what I'm getting myself into, even when I don't know, is give me the good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. If I don't know about it, I can't fix it. I think that was the first, like, sort of catalyst of recognizing I am a people ops person. I am there to be a cultural steward, to make sure a workforce is engaged and empowered to do their best work. And I want to make sure I'm a conduit to be able to do that. And where it often lands me is in positions where it's either up or out. So there are leadership teams who really agree with what I'm doing. They see the reasons of why we should be having a work from home policy, a parental leave policy, and they really engage on that. And there have been others who's like, well, I know that person. You haven't been here long. They wouldn't do or say that, or, well, this was broken and you're the one who found out it was broken, so you should be the one to fix it. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. In terms of time lapse of how that works in a role, that's not something I should be doing. And really having that pushback and engagement and hitting that unconscious bias around, well, this Black woman is volunteering, telling me what to do, or I haven't been talked to this way, or this hasn't been addressed to me in such a fashion. So I'm just going to ignore it and hope it goes away.
I think so it's interesting because as we look at as the organization changes, right, and we see like more millennials continue to rise in the ranks, and then also these Gen Zers come in, and then Gen Alpha or whatever in the next, 7, 8 years, 10 years, I don't believe that like the functional role of HR is going to stay the same, right? Because these young people who are the most diverse, the most tech just enabled, the most politically engaged, even if they're not always the most politically savvy or educated, most politically engaged, they're going to expect something different from their workplace. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I guess, and to that end, right, like, what trends have you been seeing and noticing in terms of like how younger Black and brown talent engage work versus majority white talent?
I think it would definitely have to be in different buckets that we haven't seen before. So first bucket is bucking the trend of what professionalism is considered as. I think professionalism was through such a white lens for so long. How you're supposed to wear your hair, how you're supposed to talk at work, how you're supposed to come across around that presence and impact that is changing, and like how I'm going to use AAVE at work. I'm going to make sure that you know who I am and where I come from, rather than trying to fit into good English or whatever we may call it. And then really figuring out how to make remote work for them. Like, we are the ones bucking the trend. I think all these companies, large organizations, are doing these return to office policies. And then the next day you see emails come out that their petitions were signed, or like, we're not doing this. We haven't been back to the office for 4+ years. And now you're rushing us back, and it's just not going to work. We've been more productive outside of the office. We don't have to navigate implicit bias or racism because we're able to be ourselves remotely and they're able to be more successful. And lastly, I think it's more around being able to have higher compensation and asking for what they're worth instead of what they've been handed. Going into a job and getting an offer and being like, hey, that's not what my market rate is. I'm going to push back, and this is what I think I'm worth. And companies saying, yeah, we recognize that. Here's what we should have given you in the first place.
I think, it's interesting to your point, right? I think because one, like the democratization of information driven by the internet and community platforms to really like gather information. So you think about not just Twitter, but like Blind and Glassdoor, and even like, platforms that are more corporate and bought out like Fishbowl, but like these places exist now, Reddit, of course, where you can like really get the tea on pretty much anything. So if I want to talk about my experience, or if I'm about to get hired at insert company here, I can just type that company in, type in a couple words, and I'm going to get real people's stories and experiences, which then empower me to then have a perspective and position on, okay, here's what I want, here's what I need. And I think like that, to your point about bucking the trend, like it runs really hard, contrary to these historical capitalist models where it's like, hey, like, you're here to do a job. We're going to extract our labor from you. You're going to get, a modicum, a little piece of paper, and you going to go on now. That's just different, right? Like, people are trying to figure out, to your point, like, okay, how do we make all this work for us? Like, yes, I know you're going to get my talent. You're going to get my time. Okay. What do I need? What benefits do I need? What experiences do I want to have? What development do I need? And then frankly, what kind of workplace do I want to see around me?
Yep.
I think that's just a radical shift, right? From like what these white folks, particularly these straight white men and these historically in these positions of power, or at least straight openly presenting white men in these positions of power, are used to engaging, right? That's a lot.
Yep. Or even just weaponizing how it comes across. Well, we haven't seen this before, so why would we do it now? And really trying to categorize what people do outside of work. Or like, I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is, I just talked to somebody who was like, oh yeah, our company just announced a no moonlighting policy. Like, what do you mean I can't have a second job on top of the first one? Like, in this economy with this level of inflation, like, it's not some of those things that can stick. Like back in the day, yes, you could have one job that could support entire families, get you a house, get you vacations, but now we're realizing that doesn't happen. And I think it's going to continue to sort of push Black and brown people in the direction of, we no longer have to tolerate what the old way of thinking was, and this is what the new one should be, and really making companies buck against what they thought they needed. I think like old Fortune 100 companies thought was the right thing to do in terms of, all right, well, if you're not giving out the level of productivity we need, then you're going to be laid off. And what we're seeing right now in terms of what's supposed to happen over the next 6 to 8 months.
So to that end, right, let me ask you this. So all these organizations right now, I'm getting the T. I'm getting the HRT right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm about to get it. All right. So all these organizations.
I'm nervous. Okay, go.
I don't care. I'm going to ask. I don't care. So all these organizations right now are the copycat, right? So, so-and-so laying off people. I guess we're going to lay off people too. I don't care. We did $30 billion in profits last quarter. I'm still cutting all these Black people up out of here. All right. So talk to me about, what advice would you give to employees, particularly Black and brown employees, in this economy, in this market where organizations continue to make job cuts, right? And the reason I ask is because, one, I mean, because I'm gonna get your opinion because I have some things I'm gonna add to it with the stuff I see, but it hurts me, JaNaye. Like when I see people like who look like me and who don't have a side business, who don't have something else going on, who aren't like super sociable, like they can't get a job really quick and stuff like that. They have kids, and all of a sudden they get laid off. Like that, it genuinely. I have genuine empathy for those people.
Yep.
And so, what can people do to not be, one, caught off guard, two, to just make sure that they land in a softer way?
Oh, I guess definitely take a step back to think. First thing is always have an updated resume and LinkedIn. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes when I experienced my first layoff. I was like, now, wait a minute now. Well, how did I get caught up in it? Why? What happened in terms of like, okay, first in, first out? Like, what is it supposed to look like?
Why am I in it? See how I got in it? Why am I in it?
And my Nene Leaks voice, like, how is this affecting me? And I really think it was taking a step back to make sure I had an updated resume back then, cover letter, like what does my LinkedIn need to look like to make sure I can land another job? And then COVID, which forced me to entrepreneurship and then like pivot. So really making sure you are always keeping yourself up to date because you never know what can happen, and always be applying. I think people who get comfortable in roles, all right, this is where I want to be, this is where I need to be, they don't really think outside of what the current job market looks like or how interviews are going to go. Like I think COVID was a rise in video interviews and most people not being comfortable with talking to themselves or figuring out how that looked, really had to navigate a different market. So making sure that you are comfortable with the current interview market, the questions, we've moved beyond STAR, like you got assignments now, really making sure you understand that. And two, continually, if you aren't social or figuring out what you can do, using internal resources to network externally. So there is a external webinar coming to your company that's going to speak to the employees, see how you can leverage that relationship or resources to build a brand outside of where you currently are. I think that was one of the biggest things I had to learn was I could have a huge brand inside the company that I'm currently at, but if nobody recognizes that outside of the company, what good is it doing me when I need to leave? Like if I can't quantify what I did here externally and how it's going to translate into my next company, it's not going to work. And I think lastly, it's very hard. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, I couldn't say this, but having a rainy day fund, like putting aside $30, $40 every week or buying gift cards for gas or groceries and just stashing those aside to really prepare for those moments where you have to navigate layoffs like this. A big one, especially from an executive perspective, is negotiate what you want up front. So because I've seen white men do it in terms of, all right, if I'm going to be laid off because this ain't gonna work out in 3 months. I need 3 months of severance and insurance. If it don't work out in a year, this is what I need to see from you to pay me to go and have a bridge over to my next role, and making sure that it's something you're comfortable with and that you can take a break and regroup from that.
I love that. And to your point about negotiating, because I was talking to somebody else about this, right?
Yep.
Who happened to be a sister, right? And somebody I genuinely care for.
Yep.
And she was looking at some other things, and I said, look, now when you get that next role, negotiate your severance up front. So like if you get laid off within this time, you get X, you get laid off. She said, you could do that? I said, absolutely, you could do that. I remember there was a mentor of mine. She jumped from one place to, and it was a smaller energy company. She negotiated. She said, look, I need, if y'all ever lay me off, like without cause, like without, like legal cause or something, I've broken the law, y'all got to give me a year pay. And they said, yes, dog. And I was like,
I mean, I feel like every time, like, yes, negotiate, because that's been one of the biggest things that has been a lifesaver for me. Every role I probably had since I left John Deere, I've doubled my salary. So every year that you saw me take on a new role, I've doubled my salary just because I knew what I was worth and what I was bringing to the table, and I wasn't going to back down from that. I've even turned down roles because, all right, like we can't meet in the middle. There's no way for this to go. Or maybe the leadership team wasn't as diverse as I needed to be, and no one could explain to me why.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, right? Is like, it's also the willingness to walk away, and that's hard. Like, I think it's tough too, like for Black and brown folks. I know for me anyway. Like, I asked you about your background. I share a little bit about mine. Is like, it was really primarily me and my mom growing up, and my mom did a phenomenal job. I'm not one of them people like didn't have no food to eat, didn't have no shoes on my feet.
No rappers.
No. I'm not saying that. Well, I am.
Every time your mom hit you as soon as you get off the radio.
Right. Who are you talking about? You just lying. You just out here lying. No, so that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that, I didn't have everything, and it was just us, right? She worked really, really hard to provide. And so it was tough for me initially when my first job at Target and they offered me $44,000. I was like, oh, shoot. I got to say yes, because, but as you get older and you just kind of see things like, you know what? They ain't even like a wink at a drop in the bit of a thimble of a bucket. Nope. They could pay you 3 times that, and the company would not change at all. like you need to get what you need to get what is yours, right? I always tell folks, negotiate your sign-on bonus, like, yep. and stack your bread, right? Like, live below your means, which is a whole nother podcast for another day. But
listen, because I definitely, that first 6-figure salary, I was like, let's go.
No, let me tell you something. When I went from Target making $44,000, and then I went to this oil and gas company called Cameron. I made $66,000. JaNaye, you would have thought that I thought I was Mr. Him. Okay, I thought I was Hemi Neutron. I thought I was him-tastic. I thought I was Himothy. I was like, oh, I was nothing. $66,000? I'm making bread. Like, man, come on. And so it's just so funny. And I want to say I got like some custom J's I was wearing at the office. I went all out.
I can't even talk about you. I can't even talk about.
We're gonna talk.
I definitely.
But here's the thing. I did that, but on parallel, I saved $44,000 of that $66,000 to buy my wife her first house when we got married. So like I was still you know what I'm saying. But I did. But like my first two checks, I was going crazy. I went to the outlet mall, and I'm over here buying up stuff at the outlet mall. I'm thinking anyway. So it's just funny how you get. I ain't been to the outlet mall since. No disrespect to people. No disrespect to the outlets.
Every millennial, like, person of color, a woman who has been through this and hit that salary where, like, I am comfortable, I feel good, this is where I should be. I'm gonna say the first year, like, I think one of my mentors actually told me, like, that first 100,000, like that first 6-figure year, you're not gonna remember it. You ain't gonna have none of that money. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm used to making 55. Like, I got this. Like, I can live on that, so I can live on this.
Nope.
Did not work.
And so it was just so funny. It was just so funny in hindsight. But anyway, so look, this has been a dope conversation. I do want to talk about, you just recently took on a new role. Okay. And I want to talk a little bit about why this particular role, what you're doing, and what you're excited about.
Oh, okay. Definitely take a step back because I left Moto. I did some traveling and a sabbatical, and I really had to take a moment to write down what I wanted in my next company. I think for so long I was focused on job title and accolades and prestige, and it landed me in some places and situations I didn't want to be in. I didn't feel comfortable being in, and I couldn't be me. And for Storyblocks, it was really about, because I'm a senior people operations manager, it was really about finding a home where I could work for a diverse leader. I could work for a company that understood the importance of people operations and not just HR. Like, HR is moving well beyond hire and fire. People ops is, how do we use our culture to promote, hire, and fire the people we need to make sure we have the company that we want. And Storyblocks helped me do that. So what I'm doing right now is definitely figuring out what needs to be done. So really sitting down, I'm doing a listening tour, figuring out what teams I'm supporting, being a HR business partner to them, and seeing how I can incorporate all of my career experiences from crypto to software development to manufacturing into Storyblocks to really build them to this next phase of growth and development, moving out of that wonky like startup phase into we are a full-fledged company, and this is what it looks like to be that, because I think every startup goes through these growing pains. And then what I'm looking most forward to is truly bringing me to work. I think it's so important to have a person that sponsors and defends you on and pushes back on you, that challenges my way of thinking. And I think my colleague, because she's going to get me if I say boss, is helping me to do that. And we're going to be able to learn from each other, because I've been such a millennial trailblazer. I've been okay for the most part with being the youngest, only one in the room, that learning that I don't have to do that anymore, and not relying on that flight or fight mechanism that I've had to for so long, and figuring out what that means to grow and be remarkable is something I'm looking forward to.
Well, first of all, let me just say, I'm excited about Storyblocks having you, right? This is not even an ad. I'm just telling you, I'm excited about it because I've watched you from afar. I've always been interested. We initially connected when you were at another brand. And so I've always been interested in connecting with you. I'm so excited that we had this conversation. Let me do this before I let you go.
Okay.
Any parting words or shout outs that you want to give?
Oh, you know what? I mean, I'm going to do like the rapper one. Shout out to my parents for having me, because I wouldn't be here without them, for their love and support. And I shout out to every one of my mentors who have always told me to focus on how I can fix a situation and not the person, because I think it's always been something, like I'm always been a fixer. And shout out to you for even giving me this opportunity. I think it's so important that you have maintained these constructive relationships. Like following me, I've been following you from Twitter to LinkedIn, seeing who you've been able to talk to, listening to the podcast. You know what? I just gave you a shout out on a different podcast I did a couple of weeks ago. So
word
for that.
You know what, man? Oh man, that's really dope. You know, it's funny because I think this was your section to give your shout out and parting word. But I'm gonna say this is, it's important for everybody to keep in mind, is like, you never know who's watching, who's listening.
Nope.
Right? Like, that's a really great, because it is funny because straight up, we cracked 1 million downloads last year, right? As a milestone.
Yep.
And we're probably going to end up doing like another million or close to this year. And even with those numbers, when people go, oh, I listen to your show, or I listen to this other show on your network, I'm surprised every time. I'm never like, oh, great. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I bet. You should. Like, no, it's always a shock to me. So dope. Listen, I cut you off.
No.
Any other parting words?
I guess, especially to anyone who is in the job search market right now, hold fast. Like, I think it's very easy to get discouraged by, I will be honest, people like me who have bounced from job to job, didn't look like it was hard getting jobs, getting interviews, and really leading by example and thinking beyond the moment of right now. I think it's so important to, okay, I just got laid off, but not wallow in sort of that self-doubt and really figure out what's the next for you and what makes you most happy and go from there.
JaNaye, it's been a pleasure. You're a friend of the show. Hopefully we can get Storyblocks on here, but we can not talk about that offline. You know what I'm saying?
We can talk about it.
All right. Much love. We'll talk to you soon. Peace. And we're back. Hey, I want to shout out JaNaye one more time. It was a really good conversation. Had a really fun time. I want to say one more thing. The purpose of, or the function, and Toni Morrison talks about this. You can look it up yourself. She talks about, like, the function of racism is to distract you, right? You spend a bunch of time trying to prove that you're qualified or prove that you're in whatever shape, form, or fashion good enough. And the reality is you don't have to prove anything to anybody. What you need to make sure is that you love you. You need to make sure that you know that you're good enough. You need to make sure that you like what you see when you wake up every day. Shout out to Cheryl Lee Ralph. It's interesting. The guy that made Dilbert, he took some right-wing poll that had a stupid question around a Nazi phrase and took the responses of 130 black people, misquoted it, and then used all of that, what I just said, to justify a ridiculously racist rant. So racist, in fact, that all these capitalist institutions said, you know what? We're not going to work with you no more. We're not going to rock with you. We're not going to work with you. We're going to take all your little dry Dilbert cartoons out of our stores. And now people are running around demanding that someone debate him on the merit of his position. Y'all, that's a distraction. All of that's a distraction. Racism does this thing, right? I mean, white supremacists do this thing, but a function of it is you're put in a position where you have to engage an argument on a ridiculously moronic premise and engage it in good faith, even though it, by its very design, is bad faith. And I'm asking you, I'm imploring you, black person, beautiful, brilliant, gifted black person, do not burn your brain cells trying to jump through the hoops of convincing people that you are a human being. You matter right now. You matter right now. Okay? And if nobody else tells you, I love you, I want you to take care of yourselves. And, again, Black history, American history, they one and the same. But I still do want to say happy Black History Month. We're going to continue with this content. We're going to continue with our extended Black History Month campaign with Pfizer. And you're going to continue to hear incredible stories and spotlights from some really dope people. And we have some more campaigns that we'll be launching a little bit later this year. But yeah, I mean, just take care of yourselves. Just take care of yourselves. You matter. I promise. You matter. Peace.
Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.